Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today's April 11, 2025. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Please subscribe. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Francis Cisco Bradley for part three. Where in the heck you calling in from, Cisco?
Manhattan, New York City.
How cool is that, man?
Yeah.
And we covered a lot in parts one and two. I really appreciated your time.
Mhm.
They were like one was in April of last year and part two was October. So you mentioned, I wanted to jump into, before we go into music, I wanted to mention film because you mentioned that you liked or you were fond of Jonas Mekas, which is experimental film world, which I'm most well versed in. And then William Parker expressed his
Yeah.
influence of Stan Brakhage.
Hmm.
So it's similar to this subject we're going to go into in writing, your main thing, history and writing,
Hmm.
narrative and storytelling. Peter Greenaway says cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. Are are experimental filmmakers doing something completely different or telling stories a different way? And if me and you watch Tony Conrad's The Flicker, it's 15 minutes of black and white flashing back, flickering on and off. It's not storytelling per se, but a story could go through our head. So
Hmm.
I'm just curious your thoughts of that Greenaway line. Cinema's much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers.
Yeah. Well, I would say, I mean, they're obviously, uh, I mean, to some degree, you could say everything's a story, but some things are more kind of, more purely kind of sensory experiences, right? So I think, yeah, I guess if we're thinking of stories as being somehow tied to a narrative, even if it's a fractured or dismembered narrative, there's still, I think, maybe a narrative involved in the story. But when we get to, um, we get on to something like, you know, like distorted images or anything where it's maybe flashing, yeah, if it's flashing sounds or images or something in a film, or it could be a non-linear narrative or just images. I think of Mikas, some of my favorite things that he did. I mean, so many of the things that he did, did not necessarily have any dialogue. They didn't necessarily have um, a clear and obvious story or narrative. I think that's what I liked about them. I mean, I feel like he just got us to see things that we wouldn't actually normally pay attention to, or um, you know, um, he got us to pay attention sometimes to the mundane, or sometimes to things that were that might otherwise be missed, and just show us like that there is something kind of sometimes profound about that, or just really interesting or beautiful. I forget the exact name of the film, but my favorite of his films is the film that he made about going, his return journey to Lithuania.
Yeah.
That's a stunner. And there's not really any real dialogue. Most of it's silent actually, but then I mean, there are parts that are silent, and there are parts that just have music, and the music is just so overwhelming in its power because because the rest of it is silent. So there's something about how you manage the senses, right? In a film, I think in that if you are constantly overwhelming people with too much sensory input, then it all becomes less. But if I think if you withdraw, or if you sort of single it out, it can be really, really powerful. And some of my most intense sonic experiences were exactly that, and something where it's where it might be not like an experiment in minimalism, or something where um, it's we're having certain things maybe withheld while other things are augmented through the process. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like I wouldn't call those stories. Stories. I think there is some kind of narrative, even if it's an experimental one, or something like that. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things you can do, and with film, obviously, you have more than you really have two senses to work with.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's a lot. And those are kind of the two of the more stimulating senses. So
Yeah, the neuroscientists say sight is the most dominant sense. And anyways, you covered a lot there. And the first thing you evoked was Gary Snyder saying the task of the poet is to see the world without language, then put that seeing into language. And I
hmm
think a lot of what the experimental filmmakers are doing is exactly that. And Andrew Noren, another great experimental filmmaker, said, if you put one frame next to another frame, that is narrative. Whether it's gobbledygook or faces in a storytelling, linear, it's still storytelling. But I'm curious, how would you differentiate between narrative and storytelling? Because I might have mentioned this in a previous part, but some writer told me he learned that narrative never lies. Sort of implying that storytelling you can lie or fudge a little. But how would you say there is a difference between narrative and storytelling?
I suppose to a degree. I guess one thing I would say is that yeah, I mean if it's some things could just be very it could be a series of sort of stimulation. I mean if it's I've seen experimental narratives that might be coming at you in chewed up bits, or and I don't really have a necessarily good example off the top of my head, but I know this. I know I've experienced this. Um, Narrative. I mean, I think implies some kind of arc.
All
Some type of something um, that's maybe also charting some sort of change over time, whether it's a change in you as the reader, or the viewer, or the whatever the recipient.
Yeah,
uh, or a change in the characters, or whatever's being represented in the process. A story, I suppose, could be any kind of um, collection of information, really. uh,
yeah,
so
that's good. A collection of info as opposed to like an arc or time. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, like list making, we've really gone into this deep thing of what the tradition of just making lists. And so, this you brought up silence. That's good because that's going to get us right into music. But one more thing on filmmaking is Hollis Frampton said that narrative is born out of the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Now, that's usually the quote I set up. Can you forget to die? Which we covered in part two. I asked you, but I didn't set it up with my Hollis quote, but I thought that Hollis quote fits in to what we're talking about now. Any takes on that? Narrative is born out of the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die.
well, I suppose what that's referencing to a degree is the anxieties we have as living beings. And I guess the wait to die. It's a long process, and it's. I mean, it has infinite numbers of moments within it. So, and we have all kinds of whatever anxieties of survival, or safety, or just some sense of where what we want, where we want to go, and all of that. I mean, yeah, yeah, that's an interesting one. I think that I mean, most of the stories we tell are about the anxieties of survival and life and existence. You know, so yeah, I mean, I think thinking back to your question about storytelling versus narrative. I mean, um, maybe another way to answer that is, I mean, and I say this just from having made my own film, my first film last year, completed it, and I guess what I realized in a weird way through the process is that there was a story I wanted to tell, but there were many different narratives that could be employed to tell it, an infinite number really, and just trying to figure out which one to actually employ is, I guess, is the mystery, right?
Dude, that's the key is don't, yeah, that's Billy Wilder, the greatest filmmaker. He says, make the subtleties obvious. Yeah. Don't let it, but it was your film fiction or nonfiction?
It's nonfiction.
And it's how long?
It's about 25 minutes. I played around with all kinds of lengths on the film, but it's called Take Me to Fendika, and it's about an Ethiopian dancer and you know uh, arts organizer in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. His name is Molaku Balai, and it's kind of about the art space that he runs there, and it's called Fendika. And I was on site, and I did some filming way back in 2018, uh, and then I was going to go back in 2020. Pandemic happened, that became impossible. So then I just we kind of worked with what we had, and I think what might have been a feature length film became a short. But yeah, I think I interviewed a lot of people, so I guess I do like to have some explicit narrative in anything that I work with, but then also have like moments where you kind of, I mean, and that maybe that's where certain images come in. That's where certain sounds and music and stuff come in terms of giving people times to kind of think,
Yeah.
times to absorb information that they've received, and also, yeah, have those sensory experiences do something that hopefully enhances the overall, sense of, the overall experience of the film. So
How cool. So is that on YouTube? Or are you doing
it's
the
not quite yet. It will be soon. We do have a website, .com. Fendika is Fendika. Um, I've done, I think, about five or six. No, let's see, one, two, three, four. Yeah, I've done seven screenings. So I just this last weekend. I was out and I did two in Minnesota. I did, I've screened it at three festivals and had a
great.
couple of other screenings. So anyway, yeah, I've just been doing
Good,
that. I
good
think
going.
it'll be streamable hopefully, by the summer maybe.
Cool. That's really good. And one more thing about filmmaking and what we were just talking about is Andre Malraux. He said art is to transfer destiny into awareness. So I thought it was sort of like a piggyback to Hollis saying, we're doing narrative because we're waiting to die. And Melrose saying we transfer this destiny thought, you know, what you put it in anxiety, waiting to die, to into awareness. You think that is what's happening? Because I mean, I feel that from you. You see the big picture, but you kind of flip this. Well, why be bummed out about this history of avant-garde jazz being screwed in the history books? Like, hey, you're stepping up to the plate and saying this is valid.
Yeah, I don't feel any need to legitimize it
Yeah,
or or bemoan the the fact that the history has played out how it has. I just have tried to get involved in making people, just helping people see why it is legit and
yeah,
why it's, that should be self-evident. I
yeah,
Sometimes I'll see people present, like, or like, as they're introducing something, they'll kind of go on that line of, that's sort of the injustice of it all. And I don't even think I think that's a waste of time, frankly.
Yeah.
Um, I think the art speaks for itself. Not everyone's going to understand it, but you know, I can listen to certain kinds of pop music, and I don't understand why that's interesting to anybody. So I think it can cut both ways, and
Yeah.
I think I also think that the humans behind the art making are even more important than the art.
Yes.
And
Wow.
I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody, but
I mean,
I
that,
I feel that very strongly, and that's why I think if you tell the human stories, then
yeah.
that does something, and that's why I think rather biographically in a lot of the stuff that I do. I like to know people where people came from, what their experiences, what led them to do this
Yeah.
kind of thing, rather than just focus only on the products of their
Yeah.
labor. I think you have to know the human.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful because what you just said was in my notes are so confused and long reviewing parts 1 and 2 because we covered so much. But
Yeah,
William Parker saying, I like Stan Brakhage. I was like, wow, how did this guy get into Brakhage, and say he's like my big influence? I was like, what? And
and he
Brad,
refers to him as his single greatest influence.
I know that is like bizarre, but uh, Brakhage would say, let the art speak for itself. Then he'd try to explain it for 2 hours. Because that is like we're talking beings, but me, like I love you recalling the sensory experience of going to this concert and it put you in an altered state for 2 or 3 days or
Oh
four
yeah,
days. And that's like, were you writing a journal? Like I'm in this altered state. You were probably just experiencing the altered state as
yeah.
as a sensory experience. So here's that one more on film is Ernie Gear. A moving picture is a real thing. And as a real thing, it is not imitation. It does not reflect on life. It embodies the life of the mind.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not even sure what an imitation is, but I don't think I would call it an imitation unless the film is explicitly trying to show an imitation, right?
Yeah,
I think, yeah. I mean, it's all an embodiment of a particular life. I mean, if it's nonfiction, I mean, at least if that's what the subject matter is intended to be,
yeah,
then it's certainly not an imitation, and it should be a representation of something real, whatever real is. Um, but even with fiction, I mean, it's telling stories that may be similar to other human experiences. I mean, I think most fiction is kind of nonfiction anyway. I mean, to a
yeah.
degree,
That's
you know.
cool. This is Nadia Boulanger told Quincy Jones, you can never be more or less than you are as a human being. And so let's just get down to the bare. But what's the function of music?
What's the function of music? Um,
Yeah,
well, I don't know. That's too big of a question because it can be all kind. It can be too many. It can be there's probably a limit. Limitless ways to think about its function.
yeah,
So, I mean, I think it ranges from everything from you know embodiments of the human voice,
yeah,
quite literally or figuratively,
yeah,
or it can be a journey that takes someone away from their current embodied experience. I mean,
yeah,
something that leads someone to not even feel like they are in the place that they're at. It can be an inspiration. It can be, I mean, a lot of music is energy.
yeah,
It's different than you were saying something about sight being the dominant sense earlier.
yeah,
Um, I agree. I would also call sight sometimes a distracting sense, or
Oh yeah,
I think it's why everyone is staring at their phones on the train. They're distracted by it, and it's mostly
yeah,
visual. It can't,
yeah.
I mean, some of that experience can be audio, audio, auditory as well. But music, I mean, I think has that ability, because I think we process it differently in our brains. I think it's a deeper sense, actually. Um, you know, I think it's much more likely for a person, sometimes hours or days later, to remember a sound and to be kind of like regurgitating that in their head than for them to be regurgitating an image. I don't know. At least maybe that's how my brain works.
That's
Um,
like called the earworm. When you can't get a song out of your head,
yeah, I
you
don't think
kind of
people
like it, but sometimes you're like, okay, I've had enough. Could you leave now?
right.
And it keeps coming back. But it's a funny thing how all five senses, McLuhan called it sense ratio shifting. So when you put on a record or you put on a piece of music, your ears are dominant. You look at a movie or read a book, your eyes dominant. But
Hmm.
how then that's the sense ratio shifts? Don't we want all five senses to be actively involved at the same time? So Cage said he learned from his teacher that the function of music was to soothe the soul and make it susceptible for divine intervention. Well, that sounds good. That kind of touches on your energy inspiration. And Mickey Hart from the Dead said, it was to as a warning system. You hit the log and you tell your tribe they're coming to get our food. So it was like, messaging, communication. But one of
Yeah,
my favorites is Norman Zamchek said, the function of music is to keep you from going insane.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah, that's Spike Jones has Peter Lorre's voice going, "You're driving me sane" in the middle of a song. But Cisco,
Yeah.
I'm curious your take on Copeland's four ingredients of music: melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. First of all, it's not just limited to those, but just keeping those as a basis. How would you describe tone color in non-academic terms? To the normal person on the street, what is tone color?
Um, I mean, if I had to boil it down, it'd probably be something kind of like mood. I mean, it's like
Mood.
what is it? What does it make you feel? I mean,
Yeah,
harmony is one thing, melody, harmony, rhythm. Those are all kinds of identifiable components. But I think, like what kind of mood is it relating to you? I mean, how is it making you feel? I think
yeah,
that to me is getting closer to tone color, because I mean you have, some music might agitate you, other music might relax you, and it might have different effects on different people. I always say, we were talking earlier about getting songs stuck in our head. What's one of the things I hate about pop music? And I'm not saying all pop music, just
right.
certain kinds of pop music that gets stuck in my head. I find it invasive and I hate it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I've never gotten an avant-garde, whatever free jazz. I've never gotten it stuck in my head. To me, it transforms. I mean, it like
yeah,
maybe stimulates, it inspires, but it never gets stuck in my head, and I appreciate that. In fact, if I need to clear out what I would call sonic detritus in my brain, that's something that's stuck in there. Sometimes I'll just listen to some really intense uh, improvised music of some kind. Cecil Taylor usually does the trick. I feel like
oh my god.
I listen to Cecil, and I'll come out of that feeling fresh because my brain is now open and no longer clouded up by stuff. Anyway, um, I can't remember where I
Oh
was.
no, there's so much there because I totally agree. When I saw that one Cecil Taylor clip on YouTube, I said, this is why YouTube is great, because you can just hit a button and watch Cecil play, see it, and hear it. And it does clear your brain in my case as well. But I'm curious, your I don't know if now I know you're a writer and a filmmaker, but I don't know if you were a musician ever or play music. How, in your study of your specialty, and if you play music, how do you integrate melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color? Is there a system? Is there any sort of pattern? Yeah,
Well, I mean, I can simply say, yeah, I've played music at various times in my life. I'm always cautious not to say that, I mean, I've never done it on the level of the people that I write about, by any means. I mean, I think coming to New York made me realize how good someone could be at an instrument.
yeah,
I started on violin when I was 4, and piano when I was 9, and trombone when I was 13. When I started trombone, I stopped playing violin, and then I think I stopped piano around 17, and then I played trombone into my mid 20s. Um, and I liked those in whatever ascending order, I guess, or whatever. Trombone was my favorite, and piano my
yeah,
second. Violin, I never really felt like I had a connection to, even though I played it for a long time. Um, I guess working those all into my practice. Yeah, I'm not really an active musician now, though I get my instruments out every now and again. Um, and I do play piano from time to time. Yes, in writing, uh, I mean, some academics I would say never encounter tone color because their writing is terrible. But uh, um, I do find that if I get into a kind of groove, into a kind of I think a certain level of comfort in writing about whatever it is that I'm doing, I hopefully do achieve some kind of poetic rhythm and meter and harmony in terms of how the words are arranged and how they fit together and how they sound when they're read out loud. I don't know if how many other writers do this, but when I edit my own work, I read it out loud. So I
yeah,
try to achieve a certain kind of poeticism, even if it's not something like a wonderful poet or something. But I do think it needs to sound good, and it
yeah,
needs to flow in a certain way. Um, and I think there is a way to kind of make words. You can say the same thing, you know, in a more profound way or a less profound way. So I just try to make it, especially the important parts of the narrative, to say something real and to have an impact on the person that's receiving it. It's not just information. And a lot of
yeah,
academics might just look at it just purely as information, but to me, I think there's a certain kind of experience that I'd like people to have with it, so that they might experience it on a deeper level and might be more thought provoking that way. I don't know.
yeah. No, I understand what you're saying because we grew up reading people like Pauline Kael and Manny Farber. They were beyond just film writers. They were great writers. And, same in the jazz world. Nat Hentoff and all the great jazz writers.
Sure.
Some of them have that. So,
But I
um,
should say also that I do read a fair number of poets, and
yeah,
I think when I think of like what writers had the greatest impact on me. Sure, I mean, there's some academic writers and there's some prose writers,
yeah,
but I'd probably point to a couple of poets as actually having the greatest impact on me. Not that I, like, emulate what they did
right.
necessarily,
But
but
who were those couple poets? I think you mentioned William Carlos Williams. Was that one?
yeah, definitely. I mean, he's somebody
Yeah,
who, and I've read in more recent years. I started one summer. I was trying to systematically read every poem he wrote. I didn't make it all the way through
yeah,
because there's so many of them. But he's certainly one. But early on, honestly, the earliest poets I connected with really were Federico Garcia Lorca and Pablo Neruda were definitely the first two for me. And I had an uncle who gave me those books when I was probably in
yeah,
my late teens, and they just had a profound impact on me as a thinker and a writer. And then I went on to read a lot of other Neruda, especially like his memoirs, which are fascinating.
yeah,
It kind of opened up the world to me. But I think uh, just kind of seeing the magic I mean, I think poetry is kind of trying to take language to a level of magic. So, um, kind of seeing somebody do that, I think makes one realize that it's possible, even if
Yeah.
everyone has to do it in their own way, I guess.
Yeah, that was really beautiful. You told me that. My friend said the three T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. You learn how to play it, you know the structure. How does one acquire taste?
Taste, I don't know. I guess engaging with something that's inspirational. I mean, you want to. I mean, I think if we only, I mean, that's probably the problem with the algorithm now is we're not challenged anymore. We're kind of given what we already know, and we're given what we know a zillion times. So we close down our expectations of life and the world around us and what our experiences might be. And so, I think that one acquires taste by experiencing something beyond. Um, so, reading something that challenges your thinking or what you thought was possible with writing, or looking at a painting that is done in a way that you didn't know could be done, or listening to music that stretches your imagination, or I mean, I didn't really know about, say, free jazz or avant-garde jazz until I was in my 20s. I didn't really listen to it in earlier times of my life. Um, but I remember, I mean, I've described the process, that experience to other people, where as if I had, I don't know, been out hiking in the mountains and fallen down into a cave, and it was like a world that I didn't know existed. Um, and the more I looked at it, I just felt like I was just delving deeper and deeper into the cave to find more and more aspects of it. And maybe the cave's the wrong analogy, but to me, it was just like it was this incredible process of discovery, because it also changed how I perceived the world and how I perceived things around me. So
Yeah. No,
it
it's
was
not. A
it was
cave
it
is
was,
good, Cisco. It's
it was a
Sunrise
spiritual
said.
experience, as
Yeah,
well
well,
as sensory.
you'll love Sunrise said, everybody's in jail, but my jail's the best jail. So you fell into the jail, the cave, and it's like, dude, it's the best cave. I
Yeah,
mean, the ones you mentioned, Eric Dolphy, Albert Eiler, or Nat, they're amazing. They're my lifeblood in the long run, and I listen to all types of music, but this word taste, and I'm glad you said that, what it challenges, because most people say, how do you acquire taste? And they go, by exposure, by, what you're heard said, that's the Igor Stravinsky saying most people don't like what they know, don't know what they like what they know. So if
hmm,
all you give them is pop music, then that's what they're going to say. What's your favorite music? They
right, of
they're
course.
not, they're not exposed to this other stuff. So this is McLuhan saying two things with the word taste, and I'm just curious your reaction. He said, song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference.
I mean, it could be language difference, I suppose.
Yeah,
I don't think it only is that, but I think, I mean, there's nothing more fundamental in kind of how we interact with the world than language, really. I guess maybe
yeah,
senses, I suppose, maybe in a more elementary, kind of elemental form.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, language. Um, some languages are more expressive. Some languages are more, kind of analytical or something or whatever. Just kind of set up in a certain way. Or there's, some languages flow more poetically than others. I mean, there's some languages that are just profoundly beautiful to hear, even if you don't understand what they're saying. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think to a degree, I suppose that's true.
so then what's more fundamental, language or music?
Um, I don't know what one has to choose between the two. I think. Sorry, that's the loophole. In,
No, you bring up all these words I love. The word loophole is my favorite because W.C. Fields was caught reading the Bible. And the guy goes, dude, why are you reading the Bible? He says, I'm looking for loopholes.
well, I guess I would say I think they're too interrelated to imagine them
Yeah,
different. Though I
yeah,
suppose we do know that music is contained in a different part of the brain. than much of our other memory. So I learned that because I recently been involved in a project where I was writing a book about a musician who was, when I was interviewing him, by that point he had experienced considerable dementia and was struggling to remember. But I found, maybe, I don't know if you want me to tell you the whole story. I mean, I guess really answer the question, because it was a really profound experience for me just as an observer. But I've been working on writing a biography of the saxophonist Charles Gale.
Yeah.
A profound figure. I think I would consider him one of two, maybe most profound and influential and impactful and imaginative saxophone players since Coltrane.
Yeah.
And I guess the other for me would be David S. Ware, but there are of course many others. I mean, Charles Gale, he was, when I got to know him, he had been experiencing dementia for some years. And the first time I went to meet with him, I came away feeling rather defeated and thinking, maybe this isn't actually possible. And then, I was sitting on the subway going home, and a light bulb went on in my head. And I was thinking about my grandfather, who had experienced, I should say, much more rapid and intense dementia than Mr. Gale was dealing with. And my grandfather went from, my grandfather, in a very short period of time, kind of, I'm talking over the span of maybe 6 to 12 to 18 months, kind of forgot everybody. Didn't know who, the only person he remembered was my father, but he forgot who I think his other child was, and I think he forgot who his wife was. I mean, it was, he forgot his grandchildren. I mean, all that stuff was gone. But my grandfather could sing all these songs that he sang as a child. A child or a young man, really. I mean, he was the eldest of 7 brothers, and they sang a cappella together. So I was thinking about that, and when I went back to see Charles Gale the second time, I brought a Coltrane record with me, and I played it for him. And I should say, Charles was dealing not only with issues of dementia, but also he was almost completely deaf. So I played the music at sort of max volume, and he only listened to it for probably 5 or 10 seconds before he looked at me and he said, "Oh, this is Coltrane." And he just started talking about Coltrane. And the third time I went back, he talked about, the third time I went back, I played one of his records for him. I played the record Repent. And he looked at me right away and he said, "Oh, this is me." And he started talking about the record and what it had meant to him and all the thoughts that had gone into it. And I think if I'd asked him direct questions about any of those things, it would have been harder for him to respond. So
the sound, let me interrupt the sound. How many seconds did you play of Repent for him?
I probably played several minutes of it.
Yeah, several minutes.
But he recognized it right away, and he knew.
Yeah.
He obviously knew his own sound. And I should say, I could ask him questions, and sometimes he could answer, and sometimes not. And it was a varied kind of thing. And some days, his memory was fresher than others, and just to speak openly about it.
No, that's
that
beautiful.
How we proceeded, and it made me realize, think about how music and memory are very, obviously closely connected, and how, in this case, music was the bridge to kind of extracting memories that might not be possible through just simple discourse. So, that
was really good.
Maybe music is deeper. Maybe music is
music's probably more fundamental in the example you just gave, because I've had that experience. Our friend was one of the greatest violinists, and she got dementia, and I would sit at the piano with her and I'd say, "Oh, let's play Three Little Words," and I'd hit a couple notes, and she remembered the song, and then she would take her hands and go, "Oh, from these keys to these keys, you can't do that." So she could pull up stuff out of the blue by just humming or hitting some notes. And
Yeah.
what you did was beautiful there. You didn't give up. But your granddad was on what side? Your dad's side or your mom's side?
My paternal grandfather.
Yeah, and then you told me last time your dad went deaf, but he kept singing. Did no, I wasn't sure. I just want to clarify. Did he go deaf or was he deaf from birth?
He was deaf from birth. Um,
Oh my God. Well,
but not,
how,
but not completely. I mean, he was
not
probably born with
complete.
about 60% of his hearing, and it has declined over time. I think now he probably has about 25% of the
I
standard
see.
hearing.
Yeah,
So it's declined over the course of his life. But my grandfather's mother was completely deaf.
I
So
see.
there's a genetic thing that runs in the family. I'm lucky
Right,
I didn't get it.
right. But it's amazing that I think it's evident, but I don't know evident, but it was a pattern that you said maybe you fell into that love of avant-garde jazz because your dad would sing out of key. And
Yeah,
to you, it wasn't out of key.
but to me it just seemed like music, and it was beautiful.
Right. But no, it
Um,
doesn't seem like it was music. It is music.
yeah, of course. Yeah, it is. It
It's
is.
back to Copeland's four things. Well, whoever designated that harmony and melody have to be, lined up mathematically, like whatever. I'm not using the right word, but you know what I'm saying. So there's one other question after fundamental, more music or a language is tell me the title of an instrumental that makes you laugh.
You mean an instrumental piece?
Yeah, an instrumental music piece that makes you laugh.
um, I might be struggling to remember the names of the pieces, but I would say the first time I really remember laughing listening to music was listening to Eric Dolphy.
Right, right.
He's just got so. I feel like he does have humor in there,
Yeah,
yeah, even if it's
yeah,
at the same time very serious music in a lot of ways.
yeah,
Yeah, he might just put in a little something that makes you burst out laughing. I've burst out laughing listening to Eric Dolphy for sure.
yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you. So let's go into silence. So, Miles talks about the space between notes. George Clinton said funk is the absence of. And Monk said silence is the loudest sound in the universe. I mean, you could put it in the context of you playing music, you writing or composing music, or all these greats that you've studied.
Hmm.
How do you know when not to play? How, you know, especially in avant-garde jazz. I mean, one of my dear friends is a lot younger than me, and we talk about music. And I play Coltrane for him. He goes, too many notes. Now, in the long run, you and me can laugh. It's like, yeah, or here's. I mean, I'm blabbling on. You know where I want you to go, just talking about silence. But one more thought is one of the greatest artists in Venice, California. He told me Monk heard all the notes Charlie Parker heard, but only decided to play some of them. That's funny because Monk knows about space, Bird knows about space, but I mean, silent space. Any thoughts on this? How does one learn how not to play, how to integrate silence?
Well, I guess my response would be the person you should ask is the drummer Gerald Cleaver. I think one of the reasons why I firmly believe that Gerald Cleaver is one of the greatest drummers of all time is that he's one of the few drummers I've ever seen who's never overplayed. I've never
Yeah,
seen him overplay in any instance, and he uses space more effectively than any drummer I've ever seen.
yeah,
And I think it's, I think sometimes people fill space because they feel like they should be doing something. It's almost like they look at it as if they look at it as space as an absence. But
yeah,
I don't think space is an absence. It's just another ingredient. Like you're
yeah,
mixing it into the the soup, the sonic soup that you're creating.
yeah,
And so you can use it to greater or lesser degrees. Um, I do think the most effective players sometimes, use. Um, I mean, they use space to enhance everything else that they're doing. I feel like that about the trumpet player Nate Woolley. I think that about Gerald Cleaver, like I mentioned. Um, I've seen it effectively used with a lot of people. I think you know uh, I think especially if you're playing if you're playing in front of an audience and the audience is anticipating something. Um, I saw the bass player Henry Fraser do it like in one of his solo gigs. You know I think if people are anticipating something and you don't give them everything they're anticipating, that's a sensory kind of experience too.
Yeah,
And I think that's a way to kind of space just enhances what sounds you do make sonically.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I've been saying this about Mr. Cleaver for a number of years. I think I've never heard anyone quite play the same way as him. Not even, I mean, really not close. And um, it's actually why I find that he transforms every ensemble that he's in, because uh, he's not. I mean, he can play loud and he can play fast and he can do all of that other people can do as well, and he does it in his own way as well. I just think he really enhances an ensemble because he uh, only plays what he needs to play. I
Yeah.
don't feel like he's ever filling space just to fill space. So anyway, I don't know.
But that was really good, Cisco, because it reminded me of, Paul Moshian was a
Yeah,
drummer who we were
sure.
really fond of because he was
Yeah.
minimal. But there was
Mhm.
the sort of Paul Moshian of LA was Billy Mintz. I think his name was Mintz. And we would go to LACMA every Friday and see avant-garde jazz free at an art museum. And it was,
Yeah.
Horace Tapscott. It was amazing who this guy was booking. And Billy, when he played, we would mock him in a good way. He would hit a cymbal, then he would fall asleep, and then wait, and then hit another. It was like there were spaces so beautifully,
Mm.
like
Yeah.
you could like I with funk is like you can drive a truck through that space. But
Wow. Yeah.
here's a couple more silence quotes. Just your reactions is I we or however you pronounce his name, the artist said, "Silence is music," and then Thomas Carlyle said, "Speech is of time, silence is of eternity."
Mm.
So, any other thoughts? Because you really covered silence well.
Well, yeah, I think silence is music for sure because
Yeah,
there's space in every piece of music, right?
yeah,
So it's there. It's one of the ingredients. So I think it's part of it, and it's. I mean, it's just like a canvas where you might. I mean, you could fill it all with bright colors, or you could leave parts of the canvas without any color or whatever. I mean, you can do a lot with it. So I think in the sonic space, I think that that there's just a lot. I think silence can really frame the notes. To me, it is the frame. It's the space that is around every single sound. So yeah, I think it's definitely integrated deeply. Eternity. That's an interesting thing.
yeah. Isn't that's really fun because it's like speech is of time, silence is of eternity. Well, anyways, let's go into time. Why is 4/4 time the most commonly used time signature in Western music?
I don't know. Maybe because it's basic. I mean,
Yeah,
that's not to take away from it, but I think it's um, yeah. I mean, I think it's an easy structure upon which to hang all the notes, right? I mean, it's like a grid. So you have it's one that I think that makes easy sense to the brain. It's also there's something very stable about it.
Stable. Boy, you're good. You're using some good words. I talked to Wayne Pete yesterday about this. He played with now Niels Klein and Alex Klein. He said because we have two arms and we have two legs. Or, no, he said two hands and two legs. But here's what some people say, Cisco. Besides being intuitive and easy, and I like yours, the grid, the basic, the stable words. Besides being intuitive and easy, it might be because it's in sync with walking and marching. That's sort of like Wayne's thing. You got 2 feet, 2 hands marching with our heartbeat rhythm. What do you think our heartbeat rhythm is? Is it in 4/4 or some other time?
Well, I guess I think I've been influenced by the drummer Milford Graves in thinking that our heart doesn't beat in steady time. I mean,
Yeah.
it might be close, but it's always speeding up or slowing down or changing in that way. So I always appreciate that statement that he made that that basically enforcing too steady of a beat is actually dangerous. It's actually it's sort of anti life. I mean, because we're not.
Anti, does he say anti?
I don't think he says anti life. I
Okay,
forget
but
what he says.
no,
That's my kind of obtuse paraphrase.
no, that's not obtuse at all because you're anticipating what I'm going to say next.
Too
But is
rigid.
that
So
no, Richard? But did he say that? Do you think he said it's not in steady time in the movie? That movie about him, or
I forget what he says. So I don't want to misquote him.
right? But not.
He
I
says something to that effect.
to that effect that the heartbeat isn't okay. But here's Captain Beefheart. He said that he wanted to vary from the mama heartbeat, kind of assuming that that was a 4/4 time, that the same old 4/4 time is related to fascism. It's fixative and hypnotic, synthesized, so it's dangerous to the heart. It's faster than the heart. Disco is dangerous. So, Beefheart wanted to break that canatonic state and he wanted non-hypnotic music.
Well, I hear you. I actually hate hypnotic music. I actually think, when I was talking about getting songs stuck in our head, I think we can get rhythms stuck in our bodies, and I think
Yeah,
it is a form of control, mind control, body control.
yeah,
Um, I think something that shakes that up makes you have to be conscious about the moment. It makes
yeah,
you have to be present in the moment. And if you're present in the moment, you're more
yeah,
likely to rebel against the reality that surrounds us because
yeah.
there's so many things that are not acceptable about this moment. So I do think, I mean, I think there's plenty of evidence out there to show that people are kind of being put to sleep by regular rhythms, regular, repetitive,
Yeah, that's why Philip Glass became mandatory in every documentary. But anyways, all the power to him. Here's the L.A. Free Press asking Frank Zappa in 1969 why he mentioned Pauline Oliveros. Her work was sound above the audible and below the audible, creating a mass. So this is what Frank said. Not that it created a mass, it created something audible. It produced a some indifference tone, which happened to be located within the audible frequency range. By combining something so high you couldn't hear it and something so low you couldn't hear it, it yields something in the middle you could hear. Whether or not you liked it is another question. The concept's brilliant. So, any thoughts on this? You know, producing a some indifference tone located within the audible frequency range, so high and so low, something in the middle.
I don't know. I mean, I think I don't know if this is answering your question as you were thinking of it, but I think I think we respond to different tones in different ways because I think um, some of them are closer to the human, they're sort of the range of the human voice. So I think there are things that we are used to, and then there are sounds coming from other ranges that we're less used to, and I think they can impact us in different ways. I mean, super low tones are not like the human voice any longer. There's something else, something that maybe we don't hear very often, so they seem unusual to us, and I think then therefore they can be soothing or they can be whatever. I think super high tones. I mean, we I think we often find them to be uncomfortable. They push us out of our sonic kind of safe space or whatever, and um, they can even be aggravating or alienating or um, make us cringe or something. So I mean, I think I don't know if that answers your question really.
No, it does, because it's the movie we mentioned in the green room.
Yeah.
Soundtrack to the coup d'etat, when Abby Lincoln's voice screams, it's like, that's fucking, that it is not a pleasant sound, and it's because she's trying to wake you up. And then the tuba throat singers are that low voice that can be transcendental and soothe you, but then they all of a sudden are turning. So that was really good, because Pauline Oliveros goes into this thing called deep listening. But that music isn't only an ear experience. It's something that you curate live shows. You've been a manager of like a band and played music. You know what it is. This is Ruth Draper. The key is to bring the audience up onto the stage and into the scene with you. It is they who must give you even more than you give them in the way of imagination and creative power. Hey, that sounds good, but how do you do that? Or like, how have you found the musicians you've studied do that?
Well, I think they have to shake you out of the monotony of life to a degree, rather than contribute and reinforce the monotony of life. And I think that's why some people find such things unsettling, because they actually primarily or only dwell within the monotony.
Yeah,
And you have to break out of that if you want to be aware of what's going on around you, on a sensory level, and then maybe on other levels as well. Hopefully, I don't know. I mean, I think to bring you up onto the stage, I mean, that's saying it's going to be a transformative experience. It also means that you're not there to just receive information. Maybe you're supposed to participate in some way, even if it's not you're not joining the band, but you're kind of absorbing all this energy and you're kind of trying to respond. Maybe people, maybe then there have been moments, I'm sure we've all listened to music where we feel compelled to jump up and dance or do
yeah,
something else, respond to that energy with physical movement. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm a little suspicious of any art that really requires you to sit still and only receive the information.
yeah.
I
That's
mean,
funny because yeah, that's I forgot to when we were inventorying the functions of music. Dylan Buston, great musicologist, told me the function of music is to dance, to move your body. So here's Leonard Cohen. The only way you can sell a concert is if you put yourself at risk, and if you don't do that, people know. So usually I go, what role does risk play in your creative process?
uh, yeah, I mean, I think you have to take a risk. If you're not taking a risk, then you're probably not doing anything anyway. So I mean, there has to be some kind of risk. I don't know. As a writer, I mean, I guess you take risks in various ways too. Even if you're writing about especially if you're writing about the risk takers. Um, I mean, I don't know if the risk is trying to find a publisher that'll publish a book that might not have widespread commercial appeal, but more so like in the craft of it. I mean, I think you have to be creative on how you're bringing your narratives together.
Yeah.
Even recently, I guess, because I'm in the process of writing my fifth book, I started to ask myself, am I falling into patterns? Am I using the same patterns to write different stories? Maybe I need to find new patterns. So I don't know.
Well, that's the next question, Cisco. Viola Spolin, this woman, she social worker in Chicago who her role playing um, developed and spawned a comedy improv. So she said, if the audience cannot see your struggle to achieve something, they cannot root for you to achieve it. You know,
Yeah, I mean that's a beautiful statement. I think, uh, yeah, I mean there should be some. I guess that's in the process of risk taking, the challenge of whatever it is that you're proposing through your writing or your creativity or your art or your music or whatever. Um, you know, I think you know I think the thing with experimental forms of art generally is they are proposing they are proposing some kind of challenge. Um, yeah, I think if it's a bit safer, if it's safe, then it's easily achieved, and some people just want that. I mean, because they're
yeah,
they want to see something that's kind of easily achieved. I mean, I think of even you certain pop bands where you've heard it on record and then you hear it live and it's exactly the same, pretty much. And I always think, well, what's the point? I mean, I
yeah.
could just listen to it on the radio. I
You know,
do like it, when you feel like you're getting something that's only going to be done the one time. It's really there. You're experiencing it fresh that way, and I guess maybe that's why I like jazz and experimental music. So
yeah, that's Steely Dan used to open for Zappa, and they would go, "Dude, we have to play the songs like they are on the records, don't you?" And Frank goes, "No, I don't wanna." And so I always wanted to ask one of the Steely Dan guys, like, did you answer to your record company telling you to do that, or did you do that on your own? It's probably a combination, but
mhm.
anyways,
Right.
there's what does courage mean to you now?
uh, Courage, I think, to maintain um, difference in a narrowing world. I mean, maintain independence and maintain uh, independent ways of. And
Yeah,
I don't mean this. I don't mean to get so individual. I don't really mean it that way. I just mean
yeah,
um, maintaining alternative ways of looking at the world in a world that is rapidly narrowing its view. I mean, I
yeah,
think um, you know we've seen that in this country just over my lifespan. I mean, I was born in the '70s. I just over the course of my life, I feel like I'm just seeing a narrowing, a
yeah,
rather rapid narrow active of ideas, of solutions, of identifying problems and the whole thing. So I think courage to me is yeah standing your ground on getting in, kind of being inculcated into mass thought on everything, where you're really. It seems like increasingly there's sort of less appreciation for new ideas, new
yeah.
approaches, different opinions on things.
Well,
So
it's perfect lead in, Cisco. Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as six impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, impossible, I suppose. I mean, I was raised by sort of utopian idealists, so much of what they considered about the world was seemingly impossible to achieve. Um, I also think of my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who she had this phrase. It was written in German, and so I don't know the exact translation. She always had this written in. Uh, she had a chalkboard in her home, and she always would put up phrases and quotes and things on it. But she had one that was permanently up there, and it was in German. And but really, it was the gist of it was that you have if you have an apple seed, and you know the world is going to end tomorrow, you should still plant the apple seed today.
Oh
So I
God.
was thinking about the, sort of the the impossibility, or the things that might not seem achievable. I think that's what she was meaning through that. So I guess I stand with that idea. I mean, because I feel like we don't know if we're going to succeed
Yeah.
when we set out to do something. But I
Yeah.
think the problem with now, this world that we live in, especially in the long lines of, I think, politics, is that most people are defeated before they start, and
Yeah.
they don't even get to step one. So,
Yeah.
and I think they don't. There's not. I think there's not more involvement, or more, uh, resistance to kind of things that are going on, because people assume it's impossible.
Yeah.
So I think we have to assume that it's possible, if for another reason, just that struggle in life will be more fulfilling than just sitting and accepting what we have.
It's really good. That's a kid who taught me about judo and jujitsu said, yeah, the best warriors are the ones that don't even fight the fight. So, jujitsu is an amazing word to break down etymologically. It means calm and gentle art and science. So you just kind of maneuver, don't be defeated before you start. Don't even have the war, find the commonality. So tell me, Cisco, one major element, please, that stayed the same, and one major element that's changed in your years of being creative, writing books and in teaching and just being Cisco, like one major element of Cisco ness that stayed the same, one major element that's changed.
Well, I think I've always just had a fascination with things that I don't know yet. I mean, a curiosity. I guess that is really
Yeah.
what it is. And um, I continuously have that. Like and that curiosity manifests as, as a, wanting to be, if I get into a new kind of art form or something, I often get like, I want to be comprehensive in how I approach it. Think of all the different possibilities and try to see
Yeah.
everything that's already been done with it, and really dig into it. Yeah, I mean, I did that when I got into avant-garde jazz, or I really came to jazz through, not I didn't come up through swing or bebop, whatever. To me, or I mean, I had played swing and bebop as a trombone player, but didn't find it all that fulfilling. And then I was probably away from jazz for 5 or 10 years, or, yeah, a stretch of time anyway. And then I came back to it through avant-garde stuff, and and I found that to be so much more of an incredibly kind of transformational experience. I think it was my curiosity, and I just tried to listen to everything I could. Um, so I think that's been a constant, at least a growing, maybe even a growing, desire. Um, Something that has changed. I mean, I think, maybe I've gotten more analytical over time, which I think the side effect is, I feel like it's harder for me sometimes to just purely enjoy the experience, as opposed to like be sitting there and analyzing it as it's happening. So yeah, that's funny, but I do think, you start to see things, or you start to see patterns, or
Yeah.
one kind of pushes you towards a second thing or whatever. I think, yeah, I think it's that kind of analytical side that I feel like has probably evolved for me. I mean, I think it's a good thing on one hand, and then, I don't find myself just sitting and enjoying a record like I used to, in the same way. I
Yeah.
still do, but I don't. I used to do it every day.
Yeah.
Every day I would listen to a couple of records, especially in the
Nice.
late afternoon. It was
Yeah.
kind of a whole process for me. I don't think I do it that in the same way as I used to.
Yeah.
I'm usually, I don't know.
No,
Um,
it's similar, Cisco. When I've been obsessed with rock and roll and jazz movies for
yeah,
50 years, like everything, and then everything's on YouTube. But when I go to a movie theater, I go to USC and see like the Muscle Shoals documentary or the soundtrack to a coup d'etat. I'm trapped in a room with darkness and I'm in tears celebrating music. But if I go home and listen, like the same thing happens to me. I'm less likely to dedicate, I'm going to listen, you know. And my
Yeah.
wife is like, we got to get the turntable working. I'm like, are you crazy? I want to hit one button and listen to it for 2 seconds on the YouTube, and that's enough, but she wants to, really savor that experience. So Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
In my own experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's think about that. They come up with that classic job interview response about turning something that's a weakness into a strength. No, I'm kidding. Uh, I do have one. I think. Wow, this is sort of a funny one, I guess, and it's maybe revealing, and it's not something I probably ever talk about, but uh, I think as a human being, I can be. I think I have a little bit of naivete
Yeah.
in that I think I trust. Probably sometimes I trust people I shouldn't trust. Um, and but at the same time, I think a certain kind of naivete has enabled me sometimes to do what I do, and I think it's that same kind of openness that I guess I would say sometimes that has sometimes put me into situations where other people might not put themselves. And what I mean is I kind of I think of like times where I've traveled. I've traveled to countries where the political situation was really bad. There was a lot of violence, or I just kind of like I go into situations. Well, really, what it is I don't really. This might sound weird, and I sometimes wonder, like, did I just miss out on some sort of fundamental human experience? But I really don't have any fear of other people.
Yeah.
I think when I look around at the world, and especially the world we live in today, I think most people are very fearful.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes of most other people, or a lot of other
Oh,
people.
yeah.
I just don't have that. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't really even understand it. I've lived in places where that I guess on paper they looked pretty dangerous. I just assumed things would probably work out.
Yeah.
And I've had some of my most profound experiences by kind of crossing over some sort of barrier, some social barrier, or um, you know, uh, cultural barrier, whatever, and realizing that all of the fear that a lot of people feel about whatever some other group of people is just unfounded. And that to me has been a very liberating experience. I think
Yeah.
it's also just allowed me sometimes to put myself in situations where I was, whether it's working with people or whether it's, I don't know what to say, but I do feel like that has been kind of central to a lot of what I've done as a writer. And I've lived in places where communal violence was happening. I've lived in places where there's sort of like a war going on. Um, I guess I've crossed a lot of some social barriers. I don't know. I don't really understand why other people fear each other all that much. Is that maybe that probably sounds really naive to a lot of people, but it's just that is how I think. I guess I don't. It may also be that at earlier stages of my life, I just kind of confronted fear that I saw being introduced to my life, and just kind of overcame it, and just kind of began to feel that most fear is really just there to control us or prevent us from
Yeah.
really being fuller humans. So, I mean,
No, what you said, I can really relate to what you just said. It's a great trait you have, and I think it's partly because you had great parents raising you and putting your way. You have the courage to go into these situations where you go to other countries.
yeah.
So we got about 15 more minutes, and I appreciate your time. Fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion when.
Uh, I think when it's yeah uh, when it pushes somebody, I think to be to kind of step out of themselves or step out of their situation. I think if it's turned inwardly, it can be destructive, and I think if it's turned outwardly at other people, it can be destructive. But I think if people can like somehow harness that energy to uh, to transform themselves, or to transform a situation, or to transform a community in a way, um, then I think it can be a good thing, perhaps.
No, I loved one of the things you told me in past podcasts was angry music makes me happy and happy music makes me angry.
I'd like that written on my tombstone.
Okay, there's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said it's a curious thing how your brain is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So your reaction, Cisco, to this line, you create what you resist. I'm not saying you, but like one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
Right. So, you create what you resist. Yeah. Well, I think it's maybe a matter of, if we're resisting, it depends on what it is that we're resisting. I think if we're resisting an idea, I think the more immaterial the thing is that we're resisting, sometimes the more real it becomes in our minds, or the more we're able to convince ourselves that it's there, or that it's unmovable. I think about social movements. I think like back when, say, like a whole bunch of factory workers could like point up the hill where the owners lived, that was very tangible. Like,
Oh,
we're resisting those people over there who are making all the money, and we're not making anything. So let's form a union. Let's shut this thing down. That was like, okay, that's resistance in a very tangible, physical form. Um, I think now we've gotten so far away from that. We don't even know who it is that we really oppose, or who's really oppressing us, or oppressing any other group of people. I think, um, all that stuff is so invisibilized by capitalism, and by kind of our media these days. So, um, yeah, I think it's easier now, I think, for people to feel more rigidly controlled, or being opposed to things. Like, what they oppose isn't necessarily like really tangible in their lives, so it just becomes like an overwhelming figment of their imaginations.
yeah,
um, and it makes it harder, I think, to face it.
yeah.
So I don't know if that makes any sense, but
No, that makes sense. This is five quick questions from Alan Watts.
okay.
Off the top of your head, in just a couple words. One, who started it all?
um, I don't think who, it would be what.
Oh, very good. I love when you change the wording. Number two, are we going to make it?
Probably not, but I hope so.
3, where do we put it?
Um, uh, we split it up between all of us.
Nice. 4, who's cleaning it up?
We have to.
Nice. 5, is it serious?
Yes.
Very good. How do you find peace of mind?
Uh, well, it's a little bit with, I think, what I was talking about before. I guess I'm a collectivist sort of thinker. I'm very skeptical of the idea of the individual as even really a real thing. I think that's how we're controlled and how we get separated and divided and conquered. But um, I guess, I think that, um, you know, how do I keep peace of mind? I find peace of mind. I think you have to sometimes, I think, divorce yourself from the narratives that surround you because they're really there to, I think, largely stop your thinking rather than opening up your mind and thinking like creatively or outside of the
Yeah.
box. So I find peace of mind, I think, um, in solace in ways in which I try to sort of prepare myself to be engaged with society. Uh, I think that it's harder and harder to do because we're not given any space. And I mean, sensory space, we're overloaded all the time. You're in the
Yeah.
grocery store, you're listening to, there's like music that's blaring. You're in a department store, there's music happening.
Yeah.
If you live in New York City, you step out your door, there are sounds, there are images,
Yeah.
there are things happening, there are cars, all this stuff. And it can be overwhelming. So, I mean, you're not really given a space to think. So you have to create it for yourself. And for me, I guess that I don't, you know, I think there was a time where I listened to more music, and as I become a writer more and more, I think I listen to less music, and writing has really come to fill that space. I shouldn't say that I'm not listening to music. That's not right. I think I just in my moments of solace, it's more geared towards uh, I think expressing myself, and in this case, it's through words. So writing to me is a meditative practice. I think that's where I kind of ground myself. So I think that is really important, to me.
Yeah.
That's where I think I keep my feet under myself.
It's good, Cisco. Really good. I appreciate you being articulate and concise. So, if you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Um, uh, well, I mean, it's like maybe some of the standard things. Don't be so concerned what other people think. I mean, I think freeing yourself at an earlier age, and I was freed up a bit because I had parents that were a bit alternative and lived differently. But I think finding ways to feel legitimate and feel not feel overwhelmed, or having to adhere to kind of broader ways of thinking unless those actually suit you. I mean, you have to kind of find yourself in all of it.
Yeah.
uh, I mean, you don't want to, I personally don't want to then necessarily think my own way on everything. I think it's actually good to kind of check in with other people and see where we're all at collectively on things too. But I do think yeah, I mean, I think I would probably want to tell my younger self to believe in the visions that I have. Believe in the ideas that I have more readily, um, and
Good.
not be pushed away from those things.
Really good. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Over.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Well, I guess we go with that epitaph. Yeah, happy music makes me angry. Angry music makes me happy. I think that'd be a good
Oh,
one.
that's good.
I'll
They
go with
want to
that.
Okay, they want to scent the glue and the binding of your autobiography. What smell?
Um, wow. Uh, I don't know. I guess, yeah, maybe something. Maybe it's a little traditional, but how about lemon?
Lemon is good. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Um, I guess I'd want it displayed. Um, Maybe in the hills in Wisconsin where I grew up, but you know, um, just to remind people that they don't have to. They can go anywhere from where they start.
Nice. And what would it be made of?
It could be made out of. Um, could be made out of anything. It could be made out of. I mean, some simple iron would be fine.
Good. I've never had the answer anything, so that's pretty unique. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
um, I don't know. Something that is good. I've never had. I never want. Um, Maybe I don't know. Total freedom to do whatever I want. I'm not sure that's necessarily good though, but
Total freedom is pretty good. I've never had that answer. The three answers I get the most are fame, money, and heroin.
yeah. Well, yeah, heroin. I've never done heroin, but I imagine it's pretty amazing. I never.
Yeah,
I'm committed to never doing it. Yeah.
ditto. I've never either. Okay, if you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Um, I'd go under.
Under. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
That is a question because I don't. There's not a lot that's inspiring me, but I do think. I don't know. I've had multiple conversations in the last couple months about, with people who I think feel that the kind of deep impact of the algorithm and social media and all this stuff that has sort of individualized us to such an extreme, that the people are beginning to push back on that. Just so that we're all kind of divided into such minute, I would say, I guess, categories.
Yeah,
Based on whatever your gender, age, race, ethnicity, language, point of origin, all sexuality, all that. And I feel like we're sort of placed in these categories, and we're supposed to react, and we're supposed to act and react in certain ways, and we're supposed to interact with other people in certain ways, and I think there's almost a sense that that our outcomes are fully determined by all of that, and I think we need to break that. I
yeah,
think obviously there's a lot. I mean, there's some stuff mixed up in all that that is important to retain. I think it's very important to retain perhaps, but I think we've gotten so. I think we're sort of like knee jerk kind of reacting to kind of who we are and who we're supposed to be. And I think if we're going to have any kind of unified front in the months and years to come, I think it has to come out. It has to. I mean, people need to speak to us like Fred Hampton spoke to people, or whatever. I just think like we need
nice.
to. We can't be kind of divided too much. So I have had a lot of conversations in the last couple of months about this exact thing. So that inspires me. I think, I mean, I
Cool.
think we need to, um, we can't lose our individualness, but we also
Yeah.
need to find something greater. And I think we've been limited in that attempt for a while as a society. And I think if we continue to do that, I think we're doomed. So I do think we need to find something greater that unites us.
Yeah. It's beautiful because the PBS documentary on funk, they're inventorying James Brown, Sly Stone, P Funk, and then all of a sudden Fred Hampton's on the screen. And I mean, like this, Stanley Nelson puts it into the context really well. But years ago, I was lecturing to some art students, and I said, they had a thing like, well, we're kind of what you said, push backing on social media. And, I felt like, oh, okay, how do cell phones shape our behavior? Now, whatever, 5, 10 years later, all the adults are cell phones out and they're all social media out. And it was
Mhm.
previous, it was like, oh, well, all the kids are, and now all the adults are. So it is a process of staying aware of how these platforms shape our behavior and how these things shape our behavior. So
Yeah.
that was really good. A couple more. So let's see. What's a question that remains unresolved for you?
Um, uh, how to a question that remains unresolved. I guess uh, how to manage human power relations. I mean, it's the thing that's like I feel like everything has gotten so kind of messed up in the U.S. Uh, through uses of fear and social divisions and
Yeah.
everything. But I mean, trying to find some. I mean, I guess I sort of am of the thought that the power is innately evil, but it also innately exists. I don't know that I guess to what degree can we diminish its impacts, its negative
Yeah.
impacts on people, and how do we how do we transform our society towards one that's more equitable? I mean, I do think power imbalance is the source of all evil. So, um,
Yeah.
and I think we're very far from mitigating that. So I don't know, something I think about a lot.
It's really good. How has writing books shaped your behavior? I mean, pretty much how is what what you're calling in life. I mean, it's more than just writing books, educating,
Yeah,
probing, free jazz. How has that shaped your behavior?
um, I think it's given me a greater sense of calm. So and maybe a certain kind of confidence. Like I think I do. Uh, I it gives me a sense of poise and kind of an ability to kind of stop and not react before I'm ready to react. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but I
Yeah.
do think it's given me like a composure, I think, and poise, or at least increase those in my existence.
Cisco, I wanted to tell you, Elijah Wald, the guy who wrote the book, the new Dylan films based on you might he's written 15 books on Robert Johnson.
Yeah,
I
I read the Robert Johnson one actually.
Yeah, no, he's a good writer and
Yeah.
he's a great musician too. I says, how is writing and playing music shape your behavior? He said, music made me social, writing books made me antisocial.
Well, that's funny. I think that has actually had an impact on me. And I find when, especially towards the end of a book, where I have to kind of really stay close to the material and I work on it like constantly. And, I really, I feel like the last few months on a project is usually pretty absorbing for me. I can
Yeah.
feel very lonely, and I have
Yeah.
little, maybe brief moments of, I mean, of feeling just very disconnected because
Yeah.
because writing is a solitary
Yeah.
experience.
Two more and we're done. Cisco, I really appreciate your time and energy. This is Thornton Wilder in 1928. Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You laid your cards on the table for hours. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Um, well, I guess I think, yeah, I think identifying and appreciating the value of human beings,
Yeah.
um, what we're capable of, both good and bad,
Yeah.
and the depths of human experience. I mean, I think it's why I find artists so interesting, because they're thinking, well, often beyond kind of what currently exists, like towards something else, and that's that's as transformational as you can get. It's very exciting. So I think, like, kind of how to reveal our own secrets to ourselves. I mean, that's the fascinating thing about human beings, is we can imagine things that don't exist yet. We're not tied completely to the temporal and sort of physical worlds in that regard. So,
Yeah.
delving further, delving deeper, and that we can find things inside of ourselves. So I think that's why I've written about the artists I've written about, because I think they're people that really tried to do that. They weren't just like sort of entertainers or whatever. And entertainers are fine, but for me, I guess I really wanted to. I've always wanted to kind of look at people who lived quite differently, or thought quite differently, and try to
Yeah.
understand where they were coming from. It's that kind of wisdom that gives us some hope for the future.
Yeah. That's what I've been on that mission to, like, deep sea dive, like uncover these hidden psychic effects. So I relate to what you just said. Some
Yeah.
great words there. What gives you the most optimism?
I don't know, my 4-year-old daughter, maybe, or I think artists generally do. Not all
Yeah.
artists, but I think you know, I think seeing people really grapple with existence, uh, and try to make sense of it through
Yeah.
sensory experiences or whatever. Um, I've I had a little bit of a transformation maybe 5 years ago or something, when I had this kind of crisis with the kind of music and art that I follow, and I thought, uh, have I been fooled in certain moments by thinking what was the art of self-expression maybe actually is the art of self-obsession. And so, I think I've tried to appreciate artists that are not only sort of engaged in that kind of act of self-expression, but are speaking to something about the greater human, something
Yeah.
that's not just themselves, it's themselves plus whatever. And people who are kind of, engaged with that kind of thinking. So
Yeah. It's really good. It reminds me of a line from Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. Are my are my consumers not my producers? You know,
yeah.
and it is you've really brought out this sense of what community is, what finding commonality in other humans. And it's funny what you said about Wilder really nailed it, because the first question I asked you in part one was, what's the best thing for a human being? Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. And the
Yeah.
last question I asked what gives you the most optimism? That's what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life, and he said other people. Now, most people say that. What gives you the most optimism? They say youth, young people. But he said it's other people. So sure been fun spending this time with another person, especially because it was you, Cisco. Thank you so much for your
Yeah,
time, energy, and all you do, man. Really,
yeah,
really appreciate it.
yeah. Appreciate it, Gerry. It's been really
Yeah,
wonderful to talk.
yeah. And like I said, even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever. If you get out to Venice, let me know, man.
I will. Yeah, yeah. That sounds great. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
make it happen.
See you later. Thank you, Cisco. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, take care, Gerry. Thanks so much.
Okay.